أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيها وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور وتكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نظير. قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نظير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير. فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نظير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين. فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون. قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم. قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين. قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتكم بماء معين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوصلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين يا علي بن أبي طالب يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوصلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد يا قرة عين الرسول يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوصلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوصلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوصلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد هادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزقي الأصغري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله طلب حاجات. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وأدتي ليوم فقر وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوب عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين. صلی اللہ علی محمد وآل. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد. اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے یہ دل ہے بے قرار یہ دل ہے بے قرار چلو کربلا چلے اے شہر کے عزادار. عباس نامدار کے روزے پہ جائے گے جا کر وہاں سکینہ کا نوحہ سنائیں گے دیکھیں گے وہ دیار دیکھیں گے وہ دیار چلو کربلا چلے اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے. تر اپنے آنسوؤں سے کرے گے وہ ہم زمین کھا کر سینہ گرا تھا جہاں برے حزین سب ہو گے اشک بار سب ہو گے اشک بار چلو کربلا چلے، اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے۔ اہل حرم کے خیمے جلائے گئے جہاں، ماتم کرے گیا آگ کے شعلوں پہ ہم وہاں، جانے کرے نثار جانے کرے نثار چلو کربلا چلے، اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے۔ اشک غم حسین ملائے فرات میں، نوح کی صبری بہائے فرات میں، موجوں کو دے قرار موجوں کو دے قرار چلو کربلا چلے، اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے۔ دشت بلا میں بانوئے دلگیر کی فغان، اب بھی سنائی دیتی ہے اصغر کی ہچکیاں، آہو کاہے حصار آہو کاہے حصار چلو کربلا چلے، اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے۔ پھر پابرہ نہ جائے گا بازار شام میں، زینب گئی تھی جس طرح دربار عام میں، دل کی یہی پکار دل کی یہی پکار چلو کربلا چلے، اے شہر کے عزادار چلو کربلا چلے۔ یہ دل ہے بے قرار یہ دل ہے بے قرار چلو کربلا چلے۔ محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sayyid Hasan Rizvi, respected elders, brothers, sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all the names listed on the screen in Kul Arwahil Mu'minin wal Mu'minat. Sawab al-Fatiha. Ayat ma yujib is requested for all the names listed on the screen and whoever is in need of it here and elsewhere. Let us all recite it together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amman yujibul muztarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. Amman yujibul muztarra idha da'ah wa yakshifu as-su. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Now let us invite Sayyid to come forward to recite tonight's matlis par Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad salawat.
رحم الله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين شفيع المذنبين رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذلومين المنتجبين المكرمين الخيرين الفاضلين السيدين الصادقين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night we talked about how Allah can respond to our du'as in two different ways. One way is istijaba. Istijaba means that we might be asking for something very specific, using very precise words, and have something specific in mind. But Allah looks beyond that because He knows that what we're asking for is not really good for us. He looks beyond our words and goes to our real desires and our real needs. So He grants that to us. On the other side, we have ijaba. Ijaba is when we make dua, Allah responds directly to that. The specific thing that we ask for, Allah responds to that. He gives us exactly what we're asking for. And that individual is the reason they are able to make this sort of dua and they have this relationship, according to the ayah of Quran, is because number one, they do istijaba to what Allah asks. So when Allah requests them to do something, ita'at, right? Obedience, performing the wajibat, staying away from muharramat, doing mustahabbat, staying away from what's makruh, going beyond the letter of the law, right? Building their spiritual self up. When they do that and that person performs istijaba, when they go beyond the basic needs, the basic rules of Islam, and they're trying to be better, then Allah will respond to them as well, and then they'll have increased in their spiritual growth. They'll have found that rushd. And the other piece is that they have to have iman in Allah as well. So the two pieces are that a person does istijaba, they respond to what Allah asks, they have iman in Allah, and Allah says, لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. Then perhaps you'll get rushd, then you'll grow, and if you have that sort of growth, then slowly we'll begin to learn exactly what we should be asking Allah for. And if we get to that level, then Allah will respond to us exactly like that and with what we need. The next line in the dua is أعطني بمسألتي إياك جميع خير الدنيا وجميع خير الآخرة. Give me, for my request is only to you alone. The request is for what? It's for all of the good of the dunya, the physical world, and for all of the good of the akhirah, right? The afterlife. Now, we said last night as well that when somebody can either be spiritually immature in the sense that they don't really know what to ask for. They ask for the wrong things, and Allah looks beyond that. Sometimes we are spiritually infantile, meaning there are times when people they don't recognize Allah at all. They don't even ask Him anything. And that was the previous line of the dua. That even if somebody does not ask Allah, they don't recognize Him, they deny Him, they're His enemy, Allah still responds to them. Allah will still give them their basic needs. Give them life, give them existence, give them rizq. All these things, that compassion and mercy. So far, everything else in this dua has been a recognition of Allah, right? Everything that we've been doing so far, there was no asking directly from Allah. It's all been a recognition of the sifat, the qualities, the characteristics, and traits of Allah. Now, once that's done, now the dua actually starts. Now we begin to actually ask for something, And that first thing that it should show us, as we've mentioned before, as a reminder, that if we're making dua, the first thing that the Ahlul Bayt give us is that you need to make sure you're praying to the right type of God. Recognize Him properly with the sifat that we're telling you. If you orient yourself to that Allah, then your dua is much more likely to be answered. So after all of those sifat, now we can say, okay, Allah, give me. Now we can say, okay, finally give me. What's interesting here is, after we say, a'atini, give me, right after that, instead of jumping to jami'a khayr dunya wa jami'a khayr al-akhirah, right? Give me all of the physical world and all the good of the afterlife. There's something right in between those two parts. In between give me and what we're actually asking for, there's a small little remark in between, right? Bimas'alati iyak. You see, we said that, okay, the theoretical part was done. We recognize Allah, now we want to ask for something. A lot of times what happens is we hear these abstract, theoretical, philosophical ideas, and they sound really nice when we hear them from the minbar, we read it in a book, it's really good. But then when it comes time to actually practice, it's like everything just goes out of our mind. We hear something, and this is subhanAllah, what a great point, and then when we actually go to act upon it, we're done. You hear a nice point about concentration and prayer. Like, wow, this is great. And then immediately if you go to pray after that, then you forget everything and just pray the way that you were used to praying. We hear these great points in the month of Ramadan about, go beyond fasting of the stomach, fasting of the ears and the eyes and the tongue, spiritually fast. It's much better. SubhanAllah, what a great point. But then what happens? That first fast, we start stuffing our face at iftar and, we just don't care about it. This happens a lot of the times. We understand the theory, it sounds great, we agree with it, it's rational, it's reasonable, but we don't have that bridge to lead us to the practical. What it seems like over here is that Allah is helping us, remind us about this bridge that we need. So even though we switch now, okay, we talked about Allah's sifat, we recognize Allah and those four, Ya Man, Ya Man, Ya Man, we did all that, now a'atini, now give me. But before I ask you, even though I can ask you right now, I still want to remind myself again of who am I speaking to? What orientation, what mindset should I have when I'm speaking to Allah? And that's why we say, bimas'alati iyak. Before I say anything to you, before I ask you for what I want, Allah, I'm saying, my request is only to you. So now that I'm switching from theory to practice, I want to bridge that and say, now that I'm ready to ask you, I'm reminding myself, Allah, that you are the only one that I'm going to ask. There is no other source of khair from me. Anything that happens in my life is because of you. All that khair that comes, the good that comes, it's from you. All that kathir, the goodness, abundance I get, it's from you. I give you only qalil. So we're reminding ourselves one more time, then we are allowed to then say, jami'a khayr dunya wa jami'a khayr al-akhirah. So this is a good thing for us to remember as well, is, let me share a story with you. So sometimes like I said, we get into this habit where we hear these wonderful points, but we don't actually internalize them. We don't, think about how am I actually going to make a bridge from this theoretical, philosophical idea and then turning it into an actual actionable item in my life. So let me share the story. So there is a father listening to a Shia scholar speaking, right? And this is not just some, they have made up stories. I was actually present for this. I don't want to say where I was, but, famous speaker was addressing some issues. I was there in the crowd as well. I was very young. And there was a father and son sitting together. And the speaker was speaking English. And he was mentioning a few different points. One of the points that this speaker came to was about relationship between parents and children, or tarbiyah. So the scholar, the speaker was going on and saying that, we need to be paying more attention to our children. We need to connect with them. We need to focus on what they need. We need to devote our energy towards them because they're the future. And he started going on and on. So, as I'm sitting one place, the speaker is across from me. In between that speaker and the member and me, there's that father and son sitting right there in between. So I can, see behind them basically. So I'm looking at that father in front of me and his son, and I see the father's reactions. So he's looking at the speaker saying, yeah, sometimes we do that. We agree with the speaker, so we're like, yeah, I get it, right? We nod in agreement. So this speaker is saying, concentrate on your children. Focus on tarbiyah. Give all your energy. Everything needs to be done for them. We have to devote everything. And the father's like, yeah, I get it. Like, subhanAllah. So what happens is in the middle of this, his child taps him. And I hear, because I'm right there, I'm right behind him. And he says, Baba, what is he saying? The father slaps him and says, not now, I'm trying to pay attention. You see, sometimes, even when a person thinks they understand it, right in the minute when Allah gives them a test, they completely fail. Right in that moment, when that person, that father, should have given his attention to his child and explained to him what was going on, he was so engrossed in just hearing the speech that he completely blew off the point that the speaker was trying to make. That's what happens sometimes in our lives too, is we hear the point, it sounds great. It's great for our head. But when it actually comes down to acting upon it, that's where we fail. So over here, أعتني. Allah, I'm going to ask you for something, but بمسألتي إياك. I need to remind myself practically that you are the only one that I'm asking. No one else can grant this but you. Now, what do we ask for? This is where we go to the next point. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. جميع خير الدنيا, all of the khair of the dunya, وجميع خير الآخرة, and all of the khair of the akhirah. Everything. All or nothing. Now, why would we be asking for everything here? Normally in other du'as, right, it says, okay, Allah give me rizq, or, increase my rizq. Allah protect me here. Allah take care of my family, take care of my kids, help me get married, whatever it is. There's usually very specific things. But this is like, it's like a lazy dua, right? It's like, Allah just give me everything that's good in the dunya and everything that's good in the akhirah. It's like, trying to catch everything. Like, isn't that really lazy? Like, what kind of dua is this? And you might think, Hasan, doesn't it make more sense if we actually ask for all of these specific things? Why all this, all the khair of the dunya and all the khair of the akhirah? Well, isn't this lazy? What's going on here? So why are we asking like this? Why are we asking for everything? Remember, which Allah were we told to focus on in the beginning? Ya man arjuhu likulli khair. Source of all khair. Wa amanu sakhatu 'inda kulli shar. No possibility of evil. Anything bad that happens is because of me, and still it's going to be beneficial for me. Ya man yu'til kathir bil qalil. You give me kathir, you give me a lot, Allah. You give me everything, and I'm only giving you a little bit. When you give me things, it's wrapped up, and it looks like it's only a little bit, but there's actually a lot behind the scenes. Ya man yu'ti man sa'alahu. So if I ask you directly, Allah, if I'm at that level where I know what to ask for, if I ask you directly, you'll give it to me. And then, Ya man yu'ti man lam yas'alhu wa man lam ya'rifu tahannunan minhu wa rahma. Even if I don't recognize you, even if I'm not even asking you, because of your mercy and your compassion, you're still going to give to me. Even if I'm your enemy, and all of your enemies that are out there, all the fasiqeen and zalimeen, you're still going to give them out of your mercy. You're still going to give them the bare needs of their existence. If this is what we have in our mind properly of Allah, then say, okay, I'm just somebody who's trying to grow. That's why I'm reciting this kind of dua. Somebody who doesn't care about their spiritual growth, why would they bother reciting this dua? What would be the point? I mean, the people who don't care, they're not going to recite this dua. What does it matter to them? They're not going to bother, at least with the translation or, trying to understand what's going on here. Say, okay, think about now. I'm asking Allah with all these qualities that we mentioned. What is the most appropriate way to speak to Allah? If we understand all of those qualities and sifat about Allah that we just talked about, that the Imam told us to think about Allah like this, what's the most appropriate way? Is it that we say, Allah, just give me one or two things and then I'm done? Or is the most appropriate thing to ask for as much as possible? to go and figure out, well, who am I asking? If I'm asking somebody that's the source of all infinite perfections, if I ask for anything less than everything, then I'm the one being stingy. Then there's a problem with me. Because there's only two possibilities here. Either Allah can't provide anything, everything, na'udhu billah. He obviously can because He's infinitely perfect and He can give out anything that He wants at any time. So it doesn't make sense for me to think, well, Allah can't give it out, so I won't ask. Or it's me that, you know what, I feel bad asking. Maybe I shouldn't ask. Well, that's not your job. If Allah's saying right here, you can ask me for everything, then we should be doing that. So the stinginess definitely doesn't apply to Allah, nor should it apply to us. We should definitely be asking for everything then, because He is that source of everything. Think about this. Think about if two different individuals took you out for dinner, right? They said, hey, you know, I want to take you out for dinner. Let's go out, right? So you go out, it takes you to, a restaurant. Let's say the first person that takes you, he's somebody that you know is, it's nice of them to offer, but, they're struggling. Maybe they don't make that much money. They have a job, but, they're not doing too well. Maybe they're struggling because of COVID, or maybe their business isn't doing that well. But, out of the kindness of their heart, out of generosity, because they want to see you, because they want to, take care of other mu'mineen, they want to take you out. It's nice. You don't want to deny them because that would be rude. You want to accept invitations, nice. So they take you, okay, now you're at this place, this restaurant. Okay, they tell you, order whatever you want, please, no takalluf, no ta'aruf. Obviously, in the back of your head, if you're being, compassionate, you're not going to say, okay, you know what, let me get the most expensive dish on the menu, I need an appetizer, I need the most expensive drink. No, you take into consideration that person's, their background, their economic situation. You don't want to make them feel bad, so you're not going to say, well, I'm not going to order anything, I'm not hungry. You say, okay, maybe you could say, look, I'm not that hungry, so I'll just get an appetizer. Or maybe you get, the cheapest item on the menu, and you don't get an expensive drink, maybe you just get a water, or something like that. Don't order dessert. You still, realize that this person wants to give me, they want to host me, that's great. So I don't want to deny them that benefit. But at the same time, I don't want to abuse them, and I don't want to put them in any compromised situation. I don't want to hurt them financially. So you take them up on their offer, but don't put them in a terrible situation. So that's one type. Now imagine the other side. Somebody who's, just drowning in wealth. A person who's, really, alhamdulillah, very blessed. They say, come on, let's go out to eat. Same thing. So now when you get there, imagine the same thing where you're like, you know what, I feel bad. I'll just get an appetizer. That person's going to be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? This individual, if you don't ask for enough, they're going to feel bad. Say, look, I can provide it to you. Why wouldn't you ask? So when you're going with somebody like that, because they can provide more, you can say, fine. If that's the case, I want this appetizer. I want, the most expensive thing on the menu, right? The filet mignon, that nice steak. I want dessert. I want, this specialized drink. We want everything there. And that person would be happy to provide everything because they can do that. Now, think about this. You're asking Allah. Allah's saying, look, especially in this month of Rajab, I'm opening the gates to mercy. Everything, infinitely, it's opened up. What are you going to ask for? If we say, okay, just some risk, just a little bit. Just, help me out over here. That's us being stingy. That's us doing takalluf and being immodest with Allah, or modest with Allah. And we don't need to do that. That's beyond the sha'n of Allah. That's beyond the sha'n of a mu'min. So Allah says here, Jami'a khayr dunya and Jami'a khayr akhira. Why? Because Allah is worth it and He's worthy of it, and because you and I, as striving mu'mineen, you and I are worthy of it as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I want to share with you an interesting story that happened while we were in Qum. So we were at a friend's house. They were, hosting a bunch of students from the West, and they had invited a famous Ustad Akhlaq, right? A famous Akhlaqi teacher, a famous teacher in morals and ethics. So, he made many interesting points that night, but one point that he mentioned related to this idea stuck out to me, and it was something that, I can't believe I never thought about it before. But when it hit me, I was like, I can't believe it. It completely changed the way that I saw Allah and that I understood the way of making dua. So, the person was, he was narrating a story. So I'm going to skip everything and just go right to the story, basically. So you know how sometimes when we have these, recite a surah Fatiha for somebody or make dua for somebody, what do we usually do? We say, okay, can you please recite a Fatiha for my mother? please recite a Fatiha for my father. Right? We pick a specific individual and we, send the thawab and the ajr and the reward and the spiritual energy from that Fatiha to them. Right? Or whatever we recite, we want to send it to somebody else. So in this story, this alim was telling the people who were saying, just recite Fatiha like this for this one individual. This ustad was saying, why are you just saying it, to say that Allah send the thawab and reward to just this one individual? When you make these sort of du'as, you should get into the habit of saying, Allah, take the thawab and send the thawab and the reward and the spiritual energy of this Fatiha or dua or salawat, whatever it is, from all humans from Nabi Adam until the end of all humans. Every single human being in existence. So now, of course, everybody's like, okay, that sounds really nice, but, why would we say something like that? Like, again, we have this quantifiable sort of Fatiha. Like, okay, if my Fatiha has like 100 spiritual energies, like I want all of that to go to my mom or my dad. Assalamu alaikum. I don't want to split it up between all of existence. That means they're only going to get 0.0000 whatever 1% of that spiritual positivity, right? I don't want to split it like that. I'm going to be selfish. I want to take care of my own family. So I can recite a separate Fatiha for the other person, fine. But why would I divide my Fatiha or my salawat or my dua kumail or whatever it is? Why would I divide that between every human in existence? Like that's crazy. So this ustad, he replies to us. He says, look, who's being stingy here? If you're being stingy about Allah, then what you're really saying, na'udhu billah, is that Allah can't take your Fatiha and He can't divide it to everybody. That means, na'udhu billah, you are limiting Allah's power. So that can't be the case. He said, okay, now the other side is that you think your Fatiha doesn't have any power. It's like, maybe that's the case, but who gets to decide that? You or Allah? Are you saying that Allah can't take your weak Fatiha and because of the sincerity of your niyyah, decide to give the blessings to everybody in existence? Are you saying that is impossible for Allah? Again, if you think that, then you're also being stingy with Allah as well. So again, this point for me was really interesting. Now, I'm not saying that every time you do that, you have to do that, but it's a point to keep in mind, right? For example, every time we maybe sit down to eat, and usually we have a Fatiha before we start. It's good as a sort of family thing. We usually don't say grace, but we sometimes do a Fatiha before we start. We can usually, it's good for us to remind our kids or family members. Let's send a Fatiha to everybody, all people, especially those who maybe don't have food in front of them right now. So it's fine to say something like that, right? Because again, the idea here is this: we don't want to be shortchanging Allah, and we don't want to shortchange ourselves. This is something especially which is a good reminder for us in the month of Rajab, when all of the doors of mercy have been opened up. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. It's not just the case that we shortchange and sell Allah short, na'udhu billah. But like I said, sometimes we sell ourselves short. We shortchange ourselves. Especially when it comes to our spiritual growth and our own irfani, ethical, Islamic journey. We end up setting limits for our own selves when we shouldn't be setting these kind of limits. We have this, I would call it a very pessimistic, negative understanding about our spiritual capabilities. So let me give some examples, right? When we talk about issues that may be coming about in the community or the ummah, we say, you know what? People won't change. These people will always be like this. That's a spiritual negativity that sometimes is in our minds. We might be thinking about issues in our own families, right? Like, he will never change. She will never change. Right? Sometimes we think about our spouses, our parents, or our children like that. Like, that's just, the way they are. What's the point? Forget it. I'm not going to bother. Again, we have decided to set up spiritual limits for them. Or we end up doing it for ourselves. If somebody has, let's say, an anger issue, right? They have short temper. They might say, what can I do? That's just my nature. That's who I am. That's how I am. What can I do about it? The most they'll do is maybe they say, astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. Sorry, Allah, but that's it. That's how I am. I'll just do istighfar. If they're lucky, they'll do that. But a lot of people who have these spiritual issues, they won't even bother with that because they think, you know what? That's just how I am. So, that's how Allah made me. What can I do? Now, the very least we can do is at least, apologize and do istighfar. But if we haven't gotten to that point, then that's a real big issue for us. Even now, unfortunately, in sort of the modern day, because individuals who want to discuss spirituality, or they talk about psychology, especially the idea of mental health, They mix all these different ideas together and they kind of step out of their own jurisdiction. Right? So I'll give you the example, right? Well, like what we're saying. So I know many individuals who say that, they suffer from focus issues, right? Like maybe ADD, ADHD, something like that. And what they end up saying is that, look, I can't do this thing. I can't get this job. I can't do anything because of my ADD or my ADHD or whatever. So what they end up doing is, again, I'm not talking about whether they actually have been diagnosed or not. That's a separate discussion. What I'm saying is that a person has taken this sort of diagnosis, what they've been told, and they're using that to set up blocks in their life. And they say, look, I can't go beyond that, so that's just the way I am. The question is this: who has the right to tell us what our spiritual limits are? Who has the right to determine really where our blockade is, where our limits are? If we do it to ourselves, then that means we have set up a block to Allah. If we do it to ourselves, then that means we've done ourselves a disservice and we've actually oppressed ourselves. How do we know in reality what really is our spiritual maximum potential? How do we ever know that? How can we learn that? Do we actually have that ma'rifatul nafs, that self-knowledge, that self-awareness where we can say, without a doubt, this is definitely my maximum? How can we ever get to that sort of point? It's not that easy. Why is it that after, a few times we fail in something that automatically now, I'm just going to grab this idea here and there and say, you know what, I'm done. And I know many other individuals who may not even have a clinical diagnosis about a certain, issue that they may have in their life, but just they self-diagnose and say, you know what, I'm angry because, that's how I am, so I can't really do anything about it. No, it's a very, very problematic way of approaching life. Now, look, maybe in reality, you can't break out of it, and I can't break out of it, maybe. But we shouldn't be the ones to stop and set up those blocks. What does Allah say in Surah 39, Surah Al-Zumar, ayah number 15? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ إِنَّ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Say that, without a doubt, the khasirin, the losers, الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ. The real losers are, without a doubt, the ones who have lost their anfus, their nafs. They've lost their identity. They don't know who they are. They've just completely lost the plot about themselves. وَأَهْلِيهِمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. And on the day of judgment, they're going to be completely neglectful. Why? Because they're going to show up there and they're going to think, sorry, Allah, I couldn't do that, right? You set up the block, so I couldn't perfect myself. But in reality, on the day of judgment, Allah will say, look, you had the potential, but you stopped yourself from actually achieving that maximum. You could have done more. You could have done better, but you didn't. You set up that block for yourself. أَلَا ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْخُسْرَانُ الْمُبِينُ. This is an open and obvious khusran and loss. When you had potential, but you blocked yourself off from it. You could have done better, but you've stopped yourself from doing that. This is an open and clear loss for all of us. We have to make sure we don't do that. Let's look at two narrations which also highlight the same point from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. In one narration, he's attributed to have said, حُسْنُ ظَنْ مِنْ أَحْسَنِ الشَّيِّمْ وَأَفْضَلِ الْقِسَمْ. Husnul dhan, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Again, because we said that sometimes when we are so negative and pessimistic, we can do it with other people, like the community or these people of this ethnic background or this race, whatever. They're just like that. That's one way of doing it. Or we do it to ourselves and be negative with ourselves. So in this sense, Imam Ali alayhi salam seems to be saying, thinking positively, giving the benefit of the doubt to other individuals, husnul dhan, is ahsan al-shayyim. It's the best natural disposition to have. Meaning, for a lot of us, some of us, I'm not that way unfortunately, but some of us are born like that. We just always think positively about others. If somebody tries to cut somebody down in front of you, say, no man, that's not what they were thinking. We give them excuses right away. I know he said that, but no, I know him better. He didn't actually mean that, no way. And sometimes we have mu'mineen who are like that, who will always be looking for, an excuse, who will always be trying to forgive others, who will always be looking on the positive side in terms of other people's behaviors. The other part, so it's the best natural disposition to have, at the same time, wa afdalil qisam. And Imam Ali alayhi salam is also seeming to say that, look, not everybody is going to be born with that disposition. Some of you'll have to learn it. And he says that it is the afdal, the most virtuous thing that you can learn as well. So whether you get it naturally, that's great for you. If you learn it later on in life, then it's also afdal as well. So it's the best thing for you and I to try to work on, to try to build up slowly, giving other people, other communities, other ethnicities, other races, anything else, everybody else we're dealing with, giving them the benefit of the doubt and trying to see how many excuses we can come up for why they might have done something that may seem evil or a sin or a mistake in our eyes. That's the first one. Now, the second narration. If you can send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Similar to one we've talked about before, but slightly different. Over here, he's attributed to have said, Man arafa nafsa, jahadaha. Whoever really knows their own self, who truly has an understanding about their identity, their soul, who they really are. Again, not superficially, but they have ma'rifah, then jahadaha. They will, again, do that jihad. They will struggle and fight against themselves. Not make excuses, but they'll fight against that issue that they may have internally. Now, the other side, man jahila nafsahu. If you're ignorant of who you really are, again, sometimes we set up those blockades, we make excuses for ourselves, then ahmalaha. Then we will be negligent, we'll be ignorant, and we'll be completely heedless of who we truly are, and we won't recognize our true spiritual potential. So this is something that those of us who are trying to increase in our spirituality, who are trying to become better, one of the first things that we can do is, look, Allah is saying, ask for all the khair of the dunya. Ask for all the khair of the akhirah. Why? Because your potential, you don't know what it is. Allah is saying, I know what it is. Ask for everything, let me handle what I'm supposed to give to you. Don't set up these limits in your life. I know what your potential is, and all of us sitting here, as lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, we already have, we have this bullseye sort of set on us by Allah, by the Ahlul Bayt. Because we know that not every individual gets the blessing, the ni'mah and the barakat of the love of Ahlul Bayt in their hearts. This is not for everybody. This is a gift and blessing that we all get. We're commemorating the wafat and shahadah of this great personality, Abu Talib alayhi salam. And we still know that, unfortunately, it's amazing how there are people who can deny his Islam. How in the world can they deny, if they actually look at his history, what he stood for, what he gave up, everything he had done and sacrificed. You're questioning whether he was a Muslim or not? Now again, we can give people like that an excuse. Maybe they didn't read their history, they didn't think about it. Khair. We can give them excuses, benefit of the doubt, no problem. But if somebody like this really strives in their life, somebody like Abu Talib, all odds against him, his whole family against him, and amongst his brothers, he was actually the poorest of all his brothers. The Quraysh were a fairly wealthy tribe. He was amongst the poorest. Yet he was the one supporting Rasulullah constantly. He was the one defending with his money, with his power, with his blood, everything, he was there. And this is a great example for us. We don't need much in order to get this spiritual station. Abu Talib is not one of the 14 ma'sumin. He's not somebody specifically mentioned in this way, but he was given the blessing of becoming a defender and protector of walaya and nabuwah. When we think about asking for all the khair of the dunya and all the khair of the akhirah, sometimes we end up thinking that all the khair of the dunya means like physical things, right? We talked about that spiritually immature way of making dua. Like, that means more money, more cars, more power, things like that. But somebody who's spiritually in tune with themselves, who's trying to get to Allah, they know that, look, when I'm asking for all the khair of the dunya, it's so that I can get to the khair of the akhirah. They're connected, they're not disconnected things. So that means that if Allah takes away my wealth, He takes away my power, He takes away everything from me, takes away my health even, everything, it's because that this is going to lead to jami'a khair al-akhirah. As we have from the famous narration from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. The dunya is like a farm that you plant things for the akhirah. This place, all the good that we get here is all going to be dependent on what kind of seeds we plant. We plant the right things, the khair of the dunya, we do the right things, then you get the khair in the akhirah. So what in reality we're asking for is not physically good things or things that might come to our mind. We're saying, Allah, we want the whole package. But in reality, since we're asking for the khair of the akhirah, then we need the means for it in this dunya. Whether we understand that or not, we don't care, but we are asking for the way, the means, the medium, the wasila to get to what's truly beneficial in the Akhira. For Abu Talib, imagine somebody in that position who was sanctioned, his wealth was taken away, he was harassed constantly. I mean, anybody who was living in that time, they would never have asked, openly for, I want all of the tribes of the Arabs to fight against me. I want to have my life threatened day in and day out. I want all of my wealth to be taken away. I want to survive on half of a date. Who would want anything like this for their family? But because internally his dua was for Allah, because he was a true follower of Allah and of true Islam, then Allah gives him the khair of the dunya. He gives them the means to get to Akhira, which is what? Putting the protection and the idea of nubuwah, risala, and walai in his hands. If it wasn't for Abu Talib, what would we have in front of us? Nothing. So this was a gift for Abu Talib, and he took it just like that as well. Our historians quote a story when the grandfather of Rasulullah, meaning the father of Abu Talib, Abdul Muttalib, when he was on his deathbed, he calls out to all his children and he recites his final wasiyah. But to Abu Talib, he recites something very special. He says, Ya bunayya, oh my son. Abdul Muttalib is saying to Abu Talib, he's saying, you know about how much I have love for Muhammad. You know how much I love him. Now, are you going to have that same amount of love? Will you express that same love for Muhammad? Right? It's almost as if he's, asking like in a doubtful way, like, I took care of him. I was like a father to him. Will you do the same or not? Because he wants to put his hand in his hand and tell them that you're the protector now. I was the protector, now you're the protector. Abu Talib, in a sense, almost gets offended. The way he responds, it says, how dare you? To his own father. He says, don't advise me about Muhammad. Don't advise me about him. He's not just my nephew, he's my son. And what we see when Abdul Muttalib passed away, Abu Talib, his only priority throughout the rest of his life was taking care and showing love for Rasulullah. Even such to the extent that he became a priority over his other children. Abu Talib had many children, sons and daughters. But Rasulullah was the one who got all that love and priority. They say that whenever Abu Talib wanted to go to sleep at night, he wouldn't keep his other children with him. He would take Rasulullah and he would sleep with him at night. He would keep him very close. Whenever food would be served and all of his other children would run and come and sit down to eat, he would say, Imsaku, wait, hatta yadhur ibni. Wait until my son comes. Wait until my son is present here. Wait for Rasulullah. On one day, when Imam Ali comes and gives that dreadful news to Rasulullah, he comes to him and says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and he informs Rasulullah about the death of Abu Talib. The narrators say that there was such an amount of intense grief and pain in Rasulullah. It affected him physically as well as spiritually. When he composed himself, he ordered Imam Ali. He said, you go, perform the ghusl, perform the takfeen, perform the tadfeen. And when you're done, come and inform me because I have to say my final words. So when everything was done, Rasulullah goes to the body of Abu Talib and he begins in this harsh, in this very sorrowful voice, he says, وَصَلَتْكَ رَحِمُ يَا عَمْ. Oh my uncle, mercy has come to you. The rahmah of Allah has come to you. وَجُزِيتَ خَيْرًا. You've gotten the best rewards. فَلَقَدْ رَبَّيْتَ. You've taken care of me. وَكَفَّلْتَ صَغِيرًا. You brought me up when I was a young boy. وَنَصَرْتَ. And you helped me. وَآزَرْتَ كَبِيرًا. And you gave me that support all throughout my life. And finally, when he was done saying these words, they say Jibreel descended to Rasulullah. And remember, this is Aam al-Huzn. This is that year of grief for Rasulullah. He loses Bibi Khadija. Now he has lost his support, Abu Talib. They say Jibreel comes down to Rasulullah and says, Ukhruj min Makkah. Rasulullah, leave Makkah. فَقَدْ مَاتَ نَاصُرُكَ. You have no Nasr, you have no support left. You have no one left for you to support you in Makkah. And when I read these lines, it reminds me when Imam Hussein is at the body of Hazrat Abbas, when he's giving that final wasiyah, when Abbas is telling him, please don't take my body back to the caravan. Please don't take my body back to the tents. And why? Why is it that you don't want your body taken back to the tents, ya Abbas? Because I don't want to see that shame, that look of shame on Sakina's face when she says, my Ammu Abbas, wasn't he able to get me water? Wasn't he able to bring back water? He was the strongest one amongst us. I don't want to see that shame in my eyes and her eyes. And this is where the same lines come when Imam Hussein says, Al-an inkasar al-dhahri, my back and support has been broken as well. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد.
محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا کبھی بھی چچا اس طرح منہ نہ مورا بھتیجے کو کس کے سہارے پہ چھوڑا بھتیجے کو کس کے سہارے پہ چھوڑا ہمیشہ میرے سر پہ سایہ رہے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا وہ بچپن میں انگلی پکڑ کر چلانا مجھے آپ کا دشمنوں سے چھپانا مجھے آپ کا دشمنوں سے چھپانا وہ منظر نظر میں ہے اب بھی میرے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا قیامت یہ مجھ پہ گری آج پھر مجھے یہ یتیمی ملی آج پھر مجھے یہ یتیمی ملی آج پھر کہاں کیوں نہ اپنا میں سر پیٹ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا سبیل محمد ہے بس آپ ہی کفیل محمد ہے بس آپ ہی کفیل محمد ہے بس آپ ہی چچا آپ نے کام رب کے کیے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا یہ بند آنکھیں کھولے ذرا ایک بار دکھا دے مجھے اپنی شفقت وہ پیار دکھا دے مجھے اپنی شفقت وہ پیار نہ جاؤں گا یوں قبر میں چھوڑ کے محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا ہے مجھ پہ جو احسان چچا آپ کے، محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا، محمد کبھی نہ بھلا پائے گا۔ رحم اللہ من قرأ الفاتحہ۔
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا فاطمۃ الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، السلام علیکم یا امام حسن امام حسین سید شباب اہل جنہ، السلام علیکم یا مولا یا ابو الفضل عباس ابن امیر المؤمنین وقاسم بن الحسن وہانی ابن حروہ وحبیب بن مظاہر وحر شہید الریاحی، السلام علیکم سادات جمیعاً ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ السلام علیکم یا مولا وابن مولا، السلام علیکم یا غریب الغربا، السلام علیکم عین الضعفاء والفقراء، سلطان ابو الحسن علی ابن موسی الرضا، کن شفیعنا و شفیع والدینا فی یوم الجزاء ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ السلام علیکم ائمۃ المسلمین، علی ابن الحسین، محمد ابن علی و جعفر ابن محمد، موسیٰ ابن جعفر، علی ابن موسیٰ، محمد ابن علی و علی ابن محمد والحسن ابن علی والحجت ابن الحسن، یا صاحب العصر والزمان، علمان علمان علمان، السلام علیکم جمیعاً ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ۔ اللہم کل ولیک الحجت ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی ہذہ الساعۃ وفی کل ساعۃ ولیٰ وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وحینا حتی تسکنہ ارضک طوعا وتمتعہ فیہا طویلا برحمتک یا ارحم الراحمین۔ اللہم صل